Physical evidence does not change because of public pressure or personal agenda. Physical evidence does not look away as events unfold, nor does it block out or add to memory. Physical evidence remains constant, and as such is a solid foundation upon which cases are built.
That was from last night. St. Louis County Prosecutor's Office now releasing all the evidence and testimony, including the testimony from Darren Wilson, telling the grand jury that Brown at first tried to overpower him and then scuffled with him inside the patrol car before warning him that he would shoot. Wilson also said Brown charged him, very different from some of the media accounts that have been reported for months now. What about the work of that grand jury? Judge Alex Ferrer is the host of Judge Alex, with me now out of Florida. And Judge, good morning to you. Do you believe in this case the grand jury did its job?
Yeah, it absolutely did its job, and we certainly shouldn't have any fault with the grand jury. They come in, they serve their time, they don't really get compensated for the hard work that they do. And grand jurors are used in a couple of different capacities. Yes, they decide if charges are going to be filed, and that is the primary role of a grand jury. Even in cases where a prosecutor could bring charges on their own, they often bring it to the grand jury as a safety net. But they also serve an investigative capacity in many cases, and they can conduct their own investigations. It looks like in this case, they did kind of a hybrid. They did conduct their own investigation in the sense that they were presented all of the evidence, not just what the prosecution would like to present. And they also got to question witnesses and things like that. And at the end of the day, it didn't reach the standard of probable cause. If it couldn't reach the standard of probable cause, it certainly was not going to reach proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
They met 25 times. They heard from 60 different witnesses. Is that normal?
Well, it really depends on the number of witnesses you have. I mean, normally, no. Normally, the prosecution presents just its case. But what the public has to understand is prosecutors have an ethical obligation. They can't just bring every case to trial. They have an ethical obligation to only bring a case to trial that they believe honestly can be proven beyond every reasonable doubt, because you're putting a person's liberty at jeopardy. If the prosecution believes in its case and believes it can prove it beyond every reasonable doubt, it can present its case to the grand jury and only present its evidence it's going to present. In this case, I suspect that the prosecutor, when it started hearing from witnesses who didn't want to come forward publicly, but supported the officer's position and started seeing inconsistencies between the witnesses we heard in the media and the physical evidence, I believe the prosecutor probably determined, I can't prove this case beyond every reasonable doubt. But if I say I'm not going to file a charge against this officer, all those criticisms about me being a fair prosecutor because my father was killed by an African-American man are going to surface. So I think he brought it to the grand jury to get a second opinion and say, look, here's what I see. What do you think?
Here is part of the testimony. When I grabbed, this is Officer Wilson speaking, when I grabbed him, the only way I can describe it is that I felt like a 5-year-old holding Hulk Hogan. Now, that is just one sentence from a lot of testimony. Now, Eric Holder says he's going to go through his investigation as well. But in the end, is he not interviewing the same witnesses who in all likelihood appear before the grand jury?
Very, very unlikely that the feds bring charges in this case, because violation of civil rights is going to require even a harder burden of proof as to racial animus and things like that than this state prosecution required. But the fact that he's investigating, I think is a good thing, because, you know, the people who have concerns about the grand juries have good pros and cons. The pros are that since it's conducted in secret, people who otherwise would be afraid to come forward and give their testimony. The con is, since it's conducted in secret, people believe that there's some fix, going on behind the scenes. The fact that Eric Holder and the Department of Justice are conducting a concurrent investigations. All the witnesses the state investigated in this case or interviewed in this case have been interviewed by the FBI on behalf of the Department of Justice. So you know that there's nothing going on behind the scenes here. So I think it's a good thing, and I certainly don't have a problem with that.
Just one last question in 30 seconds. Why announce this at night? There was a 4 to 5 hour gap, apparently, between when the grand jury came back with its decision and when that decision was made public.
I don't know. As a former police officer, I'd rather see the people who are going to take shots at me or something in daylight than be subjected to them at night. The only thing I can figure is the grand jury came back at noon and they had to marshal the resources, get everybody in place, notify police departments across the country because riots weren't just going to happen in Missouri. And that took time. The other option would have been to let it roll overnight, and I don't think you would have been able to keep a secret overnight.
Yeah, fair point. Judge, thank you. Alex Ferrer out of Miami, Florida. We'll talk again. Appreciate your input there. Bill.